Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 6 of my visual effects introduction series where I teach you a bunch of the fundamental skills and show you how to make various effects that are going to be useful in a lot of different projects. Today we are taking a look at slash effects and how I personally like to do them with my own kind of style. So let's hop over into the project and see what we got. So first things first, we want to hop into our Unity project and create a new folder. We'll name it slash effects, and then we're going to want to switch over to Maya. We're going to create a cube here. I'm going to show you how to just make a nice sort of slash mesh that I use. Delete all the sides except for the Z-facing side. Go ahead and go up to Modify and hit Center Pivot. Move that over to the center, nice and easy. And then I'm going to insert an edge here at 50% on either side, so we have a nice edge right in the middle. I'm going to grab those outer edges and bring them back a little bit and then scale them down. Scoot the whole thing in from the back so we have a nice shape. Move that forwards. Center the pivot. Then I go into my multi-cut tool and I just make a bunch of cuts here, evenly spaced all along the mesh. Because we want this curved, so we want the vertices to be able to support curving the whole thing. So I'm just going through, I would advise just working in mirror mode here. I'm not for some reason, just working quickly. So I'm just curving these edges manually. Each one, you won't even notice in the end. But if you want, you can make one side kind of tighter and smaller. A lot of people do that for slash effects when they want a bigger kind of a fatter end of it or front of it as the slash is going across and a skinnier tail. But for this effect, I just kept it all kind of even. So yeah, we're just going through here, rotating everything. We're doing another voiceover today because honestly, I think it's going to help me speed up content and not have such long videos where I'm just rambling. So we're going to try it out again. It was an accident last time because my audio got messed up, but here we are again. I'm sure there's a way faster way to do this, especially with like Blender or something, but I am not a 3D artist. I am a visual effects artist, and I just whip up meshes the only way I know how. Getting in there and rotating edges. Scooting those end edges back and kind of leveling everything out after rotating the edges. So I get a nice smooth curve across. Very nice. There's a lot of different ways you can make this mesh, and I have multiple different kinds of slash meshes that I use, depending on what I'm making. Sometimes I need a bigger, longer one, or a full circle slash, things like that. But just to get us started and get you familiar with the whole concept of using a mesh for a slash, we're just going to keep it nice and simple for this one. Just do a little curve. We're renaming it here, as you always should, so you can find it later in your project. Moving my pivot back a little bit. I like to just keep the pivot right there at the end of the center. Freezing the transforms, deleting non-deformer history, and exporting it. And I think I named it VFX tutorial / mesh, something like that. All right, go into the project, right click to import the asset. There we have it. Drag it into our scene. Notice it's really small, so I scale up the scale factor by 20. And it'll be dependent on how big you actually made it in Maya. We're going to create a new shader. URP, unlit shader graph. Name it slash, open her up. Allow material overrides over there. And then just set everything just like we did for the explosion ring. The cylinder. Create a rounded rectangle, as we know. We love a good rounded rectangle. Add a tiling and offset node, because this is what's going to allow us to kind of offset it across the mesh, across the UVs. Make the wrong node there. We want a vector 2, plug that into the offset, and then a slider plugged into the X of the vector 2. Change it from -1 to 1 on the min and max on the slider. And then I get some size controls in. You want to keep height and width separate for this. Convert those to properties, name them as they are, height and width. Convert the scroll feature, or we're scrolling the whole texture across it, to a property. Create a new material out of the shader. Hook it up to the mesh, and realize that I didn't plug anything in. Go back, plug that into base color and alpha, so you can actually see it. And not realize why I can't see it. Not scaled down. What's going on here? Why can't I see it? It's because I didn't actually UV this before I exported it, and I was so confused. Yeah, you gotta lay out your UV. So I go into my UV editor, forgot to do this, click on that plane UV shell and hit normalize, because we want it to just be a square across the whole UV. That's what I love. Re-export it. Doing just a square across the entire UV map is so nice. Re-import it, delete the one we had. Now we have UVs, as you can see. And as we scroll our slider across, you see we have that whole rounded rectangle scrolling itself across the front. We can make it wider. I'm just messing around here, seeing how the vibe is. It's pretty good. So now you can kind of see how the height and width controls on it. So now what we want to do is add some distortion to it. So you get a lerp node, a UV node, plug those in. A noise, because remember we're feeding noise into the UV information. Slider to lerp it in. Plug that into the UV of the tiling and offset node, convert it to a property, name it distortion. And then a float to control the scale of our noise. Distortion scale. I don't know what I was looking for here. Okay, I'm going to add the second color tone. So we go ahead and create a second rounded rectangle, and we create a multiply node. And we're basically telling it to multiply our height and width nodes by half. So this rectangle here will be half the size. And I'm doing the same float for height and width here. I change it later to separate both because I realize that I need that. Subtract one from the other, so we have a nice outline there, just like we did for the cylinder. Create a multiply the outer rim by a color, set it to whatever color you want by default. Do the same for the bottom. There you go, plug them in, and then you want to create an add node and add them together. Scoot that over, make some room, plug it into the base color node. Convert those to properties so I can control it. I like to keep my colors up top of the material properties for whatever reason. And look at that, now we got colors. So convert those to whatever you want. I wanted to do this like bright red edge with the black behind it. Here's where I fix up this and separate them. So I have height and width controls on the second one. So we're just controlling that multiply node. We're saying multiply by whatever amount we're putting in so we can control the size of that independently from the size of the first one. There we go. So I increase the width so it matches the whole thing, and I realize here I forgot to plug in my distortion to the outer edge there. You want to do that. You want to plug the same UV stuff into your smaller rectangle. And there we go. Now we got the distortion. Very cool. Here I'm just messing around trying to get the outer edge the size that I want it to be, or the core edge to be the size I want it to be. Slowly realizing I also should separate out the size of the outer color, that black. That way I can control the size of both independently and then also have the overall size. Getting a pretty cool look here so far. I like it. What did I decide to do here? Let's find out. Okay, here's where I'm setting up the same kind of thing. I'm setting up the roundness here, making the roundness an exposed thing, because I actually don't want it to be a square. I ended up making it a circle, stretched out circle over the plane, because I just like that better. You see how we have the hard edges as it's going in and out of the sides? We're going to fix that later with a mask, because we don't really like those hard edges. Here I'm just trying to find a balance between distortion and the front edge and everything, because the smaller something is, the more the distortion is going to affect it. I could have always controlled that independently. I could have set up a separate distortion for that core edge, which would be another good way to handle it, instead of sharing the same as the outer edge distortion. Maybe I'll do that in the future. Lesson learned. Here I tried to plug in tiling to the distortion, but I realized I plugged it into the wrong spot. I plugged in the tiling to my rounded rectangles instead, and I was like, what's going on here? So fix that, create a tiling and offset node, plug it into the distortion noise, plug that tiling in there so I can control it there. I make the tiling nice and short on the X, and then I bring it up on the Y, so we have kind of a line look. I don't know, like a motion line look. Almost looks like a pen stroke or a brush stroke. Very cool. Adds a lot of just natural motion to it, having those lines that you can see. And here's where I decided to separate out the size of the outer edge. So I did the same thing I did down there, set up a multiplier, and then have a different float that controls that multiplier for each one, height and width. That way I can have an overall size control to just scale up the whole thing if I want, or I can go in and control either one. It's nice to just be able to tinker with it. There we go. Now I can bring that black in a little bit so it's not so heavy in the back end. Here we go. We get some nice curvature there along our slash. And you can always change your mesh shape as well if you want it to be more of like a 180 coverage or anything like that. Now we're going to create a mask around it to help with that hard edge. So we're going to create a rounded rectangle. And picture our UVs right now. It's a square. So we are creating a mask over our UVs right now. For the alpha, we're going to distort it. And you'll see how much it'll help on those edges. Plug that distortion, same way we always do distortion. Slider there to control the height and the width, so we can just overall control the size of the mask. And then you want to multiply that by our initial rectangle, our alpha. Plug that in, save, go back. Now, as you can see on our edge, we're not having a hard edge anymore. It's a little bit broken up because that mask is stopping it. Now we're going to go in and add some movement to our distortion. So time node, multiply node, and a vector 2. Vector 2 goes into the multiply, so does the time. Plug that into the offset that's plugged into the distortion noise. That way we can add a little bit of scrolling on it, so it helps with the movement. And we are trying to hook up the distortion speed as well to the mask right now, because we want that mask to also scroll along with it. I keep trying to reuse my distortion nodes up there, the tiling and offset node that's plugged into my distortion up there, but it ends up not working. So I end up creating a separate tiling and offset for that distortion at the bottom. I think it's because I'm distorting the mask a little bit too much, and it just makes the whole thing invisible. I'm working very quickly here, so I'm trying to make these videos shorter, so I kept just trying to reuse things, but just create another distortion feature down here with a separate tiling and offset. It's better to just keep stuff separated in case you need to adjust one thing and not both. There, I try again. I think that actually ends up working though. No, it does not. The reason why it's not working is because that distortion that's plugged into that tiling and offset is like scrolling my entire mask with it. It's not doing its job of locking in place. It's scrolling along with the slash. So you don't want that. You want your mask locked in place. So just distort it separately, and you can control the speed and make it the same as the speed of the other distortion. And then plug that same tiling and offset node into the noise that's distorting our mask. Now it'll work properly. So as you see, I bring that mask down, it masks the whole thing inwards, and now you see the edges are nice and frizzled, and the tiling is the same all around. It just looks a lot cleaner, and now we can add some speed to it. It's nice to just have a little bit of extra movement, extra motion. Also helps each slash look a little different and not exactly the same. I'm just lining up my mask here, checking both sides to see where I need to bring that mask inwards. Now we're going to create a lerp and plug the colors of each one into their own separate lerp. And the reason we're doing this is because we want it to start off as the slash is being created. We want to start off as a really bright color because I like an initial flash. So we're plugging in our lerps with the colors, and we are creating a new color slider there to control those lerps. We're saying if this lerp is true, give us our one color instead of separating it like we were. So we're lerping between one color for both and lerping into our separate two colors. That way we can control start color. I'll show you how we do that later. So I'm saying I want a nice, bright, hot color for it to start. And as we lerp between the colors, you can see how that's working out. So now we're going to make this usable in particle systems. So UV node, let's change it to UV1, split it. We're going to do a branch here and plug that's the B or the G, whatever. And we're saying if it's false, use that slider. If it's true, use the UV. Replace that in the color, or replace that in the time on our color nodes, on our color lerps. Make a boolean, rename it to UV, start color, whatever you want to do. Color lerp, start color lerp. And I always just put the letter that it corresponds to in the particle system. That one is Z in the particle system. And we're going to do the same down here. We're going to split out a UV1. do another branch, and this is to control the scroll, that left to right scroll, or right to left, depending which way your mesh is flipped. We're saying that if this Boolean is true, take the UV information for here. And this is a remap node. This is really cool. So the UV information is 0 to 1 by default, or 1 to 0, depending. It doesn't matter when you plug it in, you can flip it, and you can change that output. So we know the slider works from -1 to 1 as it slides back and forth. So we want to remap that information from the UV from 0 to 1, because that's what it is by default when it comes out of a UV. And then we're changing it to -1 and 1. So that when we make a curve in our particle system to control that over the lifetime, 0 to 1 just means -1 to 1. It's a little confusing at first, but you'll understand remap nodes eventually. Creating a particle system now, setting everything to just 1 lifetime, no speed, emission 1, make it a sphere shape, reduce it down as low as it goes. In radius, change billboard to mesh, slide in our new mesh, and slide in our new material. Change it from from camera facing to local facing, and then boom, we got our particle system emitting our mesh now. Now toggle those bools on so we can control those with a curve. Turn on custom vertex streams, UV, UV2, custom 1, X, Y, Z, W. Turn on the vector under the custom data, and as you can see, that's controlling our slider. So we can set up a curve so it does it over the lifetime of our particle. I did a linear curve. You might want to do an ease in or ease out. Up to you. And then we're also going to do a curve for the start color. This is that lerp that we did earlier. So I kind of just eyeball it here. I scroll through the whole simulation and I adjust this key backwards, and you can right click a key and hit edit and control the value and the time of where that key is. Do that all the time. So I'm saying there is where I kind of want it to be at its bright stage, but it's not lasting long enough right now, so I increase it. I think I landed on like 0.5 for the time that I want it to be fully bright and then fall off. I increase that brightness a bit so makes it extra punchy right as that slash comes out. A nice bright hit. And there we have it. Looks great. I think we want to decrease the lifetime a little bit. Change it to a burst so it happens instantly. Change the lifetime. Looks like 0.4. 0.5, probably fine. Change the duration there so the cycle will happen quicker so I can see more slashes coming out. That's looking real nice. I do a little bit of size over lifetime, but I don't want it to start from nothing. I want it to start from, a decent size, just so it grows just a tiny bit as it slashes. Just extra motion wherever we can get it. So we want it to grow from like 0.9 to 1, basically. Just a little bit of growth as it comes out. Switch to our game view here. Oh, we gotta line up our camera. Control Shift F when you click your camera to bring it to the same view as your scene view. There we have it. We got a nice slash there in our game view. This is how I prefer to do slashes. I think it looks really cool. And another thing here, the reason why we're doing it like this is with the mesh and everything is because it looks great from every angle, as opposed to using like a trail or a line render or anything. It looks good from all angles. If this was in front of you, you'd be able to see all those edges. Thank you guys so much for watching. That's going to wrap it up for the day. I hope you learned something new. It's a really cool, fun way to do slashes. I really like it because that geometry just really helps fill the space instead of doing like a 2D plane, just so it looks good from all angles. And I like I like getting those multiple tones of color. You could even add a third in there if you wanted to. That's your challenge, I guess. See if you can add a third color in in those 2 layers of color. Show this to your mom. Show this to your dad. Do the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you next time.